Last tier list I did was about the consoles. This tier list is about specifically the controllers. Last video I talked about the controllers a little bit, but this one is going to be a lot more in depth because there's a couple of controllers here that I would love to talk about. So let's get right into it without further ado. Okay, so this is our controllers tier list. We're going to start with the NES controller, the gamepad as they're calling it. This is probably the most classic controller that's out there. Anytime you think of a regular controller, you think of a small D-pad and a couple buttons. The basic video game controller with 8-bit, that's the one that usually goes. I'm going to put it at B because there are much better options for playing NES games, like the dog bone that's not on here. It's like the shape of the Super Nintendo controller, but it was so close to being the perfect controller for the NES. But this one was doable. Now, a lot of people are complaining that the harsh edges on the Nintendo controller are very harsh and very uncomfortable. But when I had my NES Classic for a brief period of time, I personally never had an issue with it, but a lot of people don't really like it. But there are better options out there for 8-bit controllers, but this one for the time was the best you can get. And similarly, the Game Boy, the way it feels is pretty much the same. It's just a handheld and a screen, and then that's it. I think I'm putting that at A because it feels a lot. Would I say it feels a lot better? I don't know, because I do remember it was fat, but it was very comfortable to hold. Like just playing it up like that, just, you know, doing that a little bit. But yeah, I'm putting that at A because it feels better. The Sega Genesis controller I have never actually held or played with. I don't know if at Free Play Florida they had the Genesis. I mean, they did have the Genesis. I don't know if I even remember holding the controller for that long, but I cannot speak for the Sega Genesis controller. The Super Nintendo controller, I think, goes at an S because making the jump from NES to SNES was very crucial. The controller felt so much better to hold in the hands, but it was very, very comfortable. When I got my SNES Classic and holding that controller in what felt like years, it felt like no time has passed, and I felt great holding it again. I honestly felt like a kid again just holding that controller, because there's a lot of experience that goes into playing older games, and part of it is holding the controller that's in your hand. And I think it's very ergonomic. It was form-fitting to the hands. It was very comfortable, so that's going at S. This is the original PlayStation controller. Now, as you can see, there's no analog sticks because at the time that the first PlayStation came out, there were no analog sticks. And it pretty much played like a Super Nintendo controller, except it had like handles on the bottom, which was so much better. Like, they were just making controllers that were feeling a lot better to the hands. I don't have the PlayStation Classic, so I can't really speak on how it would feel again. But I'm pretty sure that it felt great because it was very ergonomic and very light. The Nintendo 64 controller. Now, this is a very weird one, I will say. Just because I have very sentimental memories playing the Nintendo 64, I do admit that it is a very odd looking controller. I would put that at C, honestly, because it was not what people were used to. It had 3 prongs and 3 handles instead of 2. Because you hold the controller like this with the index finger on the Z button, and then you move the thumbstick around like that. I never held it like that. I always felt that it was a little bit less comfortable holding it that way. I always held it like, if I had my original Nintendo 64 controller, I would show you guys, but I never held it like that. I never held it the original way because as a kid, I would always hold it with my 2 fingers on the analog stick, but it was weird. But it is a weird controller, I will admit. What's not, now okay, they don't have the PlayStation 2 controller on here, the DualShock 2. They do have the DualShock 1, which feels leagues better. I will also put that at S, because the thumbsticks felt really great to move around, like the left stick and the right stick. And plus, you could press them down, and those acted as additional buttons. You had L1 and R1, L2 and R2, and then you have L3 and R3. Now, I don't know why they're labeled like that, but I just went along with it because it's L3 and R3. So pressing that is just, you know, it felt great. It added so many additional buttons, so I'm great. I'm happy about that. DualShock 1 and 2 felt pretty much identical. And I will talk about the PlayStation 3 controller in a little bit, so I think, honestly, I will put that at S again, because it's pretty much identical. They haven't changed their layout of the controller since like 1990, until the PS4 came out. We're gonna get to that later. What I will say about the PlayStation controllers is that they did not really mess with their design that much. Every single time the PlayStation came out with a new console, or Sony came out with a new console, like, it was very similar, but you knew what to expect. It's like they found a design that worked and they stuck with it. And that's what I like about the PlayStation controller. But with Nintendo, they're always like innovating, but God bless Nintendo for being, you know, experimental with their designs. But you know, with the PlayStation, you knew what to expect. So that's what I like about PlayStation. So you knew exactly what to expect with those controllers. The Xbox controller, I remember playing that as a kid for a brief period of time and not really being a fan of the way the buttons are. The way it was really heavy. It was a really heavy controller. Now, I'm only putting it, what's keeping it at D and not at F is because they have come out with a smaller, more comfortable controller. I think it's called the Xbox S controller, I'm not sure. That's a lot better than the Duke. I mean, if it was the Duke, I would have put it at F. If they just kept the Duke as is, I would have put it at F. But what's keeping it at D is that they changed the design of it to make it a lot more manageable. Nobody really was a fan of this controller. It was really fat. Like, especially for my tiny hands as a kid, it was really difficult to hold. So the Game Boy Advance, that one was very comfortable. I'm putting that at A. That one is also very comfortable. For long play sessions, it was also ergonomic. 2 L buttons, it was pretty standard. It kind of sort of felt like the Game Boy, but the screen was in the middle, so it felt a lot more comfortable, I would say. But the Game Boy Advance SP really brought it to justice. I'm putting that at S because when I played Super Mario Advance and when I played like Kirby's Nightmare and Dreamland on there, I loved the way it felt. And the backlight you could press on there, like you could turn off the backlight. I don't know why you would turn off the backlight, but you could turn on the backlight. The Nintendo GameCube controller. Immediate S. I don't know. I spoke about that controller in the last video, and I'm pulling it out again just for people that want to see. What I will say about that controller is that there's something about it that just feels right. When you hold it in your hands, it just feels right. It feels like the most perfect controller that you, well, there are other actually really good controllers, but that one specifically, at the time, was probably Nintendo's greatest controller that they ever made. It was a lot more manageable than the N64. The analog stick, like the left stick, was a lot better to move around with your thumb and not holding it like that. Like, this feels a lot better. And this also feels, well, I look at the C stick and I realize, like, hey, this feels great, but it feels like it was made for ants, but at the same time, it's like, I think it's still great, despite the C stick being a little bit too small to, like, put your thumb on. It doesn't feel that amazing, but the right stick does. The right stick feels amazing. The left stick feels amazing, I mean. Left, right, doesn't matter. All I'm saying is, the Nintendo GameCube controller, overall, is the most perfect controller. Because when you look at the Wii and when you look at the Wii U, they re-released the GameCube controller for the Wii and the Wii U. If that's not a testament to how good the GameCube controller was, I don't know what is. I'm gonna have to give it to other people and say, like, would you play with this controller? Like, yeah, I could see myself playing with that. Anybody loves the Nintendo GameCube controller. That's all that's up for discussion. The Nintendo DS, I'm actually gonna put it at B. Okay, I'm actually gonna put it at A because it was innovative for using a touchscreen, like a stylus. You use like a small little pen to draw and stuff. I liked it for that, and there were very few games that I had that actually used the stylus. Sometimes I would actually play it like this with the stylus in my hand, and just in case I needed to use it. But I still think it worked. They added 4 buttons, just like the Super Nintendo controller, which I think works well. I mean, honestly, you could have put like any Super Nintendo game on there because it has all the buttons you need. Like, seriously, it has all the buttons you need for that. So why they didn't put Super Nintendo on the Nintendo DS blows me away. But anyways, the PSP. I don't know what happened to my PSP, but I'm actually gonna put that at B, because it did have only one analog stick for like other movements, but it was kind of rigid. Like, it wasn't like the curves were form-fitting, but it was also like as thick as a Nintendo controller, like the NES controller, which had harsher edges. That didn't have any harsh edges, but it was just like sometimes like the actual edge and corners just like cut into your hand, which didn't really feel that great. But that's just my opinion. I don't know, I didn't really play with the PSP that much, but I do remember just having the actual handheld was just, I don't know, it didn't really, there were other much better controllers like that, but the Xbox 360 controller, I actually like this controller. Now, I said the console itself wasn't great. The controller itself gets an S because it's so comfortable. It's so much more manageable. It's pretty much the standard for what controllers are now, because you can push in the thumbsticks, you have your D-pad, you have your 4 buttons, you have your bumper and shoulder buttons that you need for like other games. So a lot of people, when they game on the PC, they use something like an Xbox 360 controller or the Xbox One controller, which I'll get to later. I'm putting it at S because it felt very comfortable. I've played it like once or twice, but I remember I liked the feeling of the controller. But the console itself, what's the good use of a controller if the console itself didn't work? That was my thinking. Again, the reason I didn't buy an Xbox 360 was the fear of getting the red ring of death. The Wii Mote. Now, back when I had the Wii, I called it a Wii Remote, but I didn't know that it was called a Wii Mote. It feels like a slab of butter. It feels like you're holding a stick of butter. I actually have the controller right here. As a remote controller, it feels like a remote controller, but it also feels like a stick of butter. For long play sessions, I would only use this for like Wii Sports or something like that. Hitting the bat, rolling, using it as like a boxing glove. Like, for small play sessions, I guess it's okay. But if you're holding it like an NES controller, because this is all you need, like the 2 buttons, and then it doesn't feel right. To me, it does not really feel the best. So I'm putting it at C because it's great for other things. Oh, also, I know this never happened to me. With most people that I've heard, you need to take the batteries out whenever you're not using the Wii Remote, because whenever you would leave your batteries in these controllers, again, this never happened to me, but you would find corrosion and like sulfate crystals on these batteries. With my controllers, I never had that problem. Like, I left it in for like long periods of time, and I never had the sulfate crystals on the Wii Remote, so I don't know. Never happened to me, but I know it was a problem for others. I hope Nintendo actually fixed that. I don't know. I did have a rechargeable battery. I think that was the reason why. But with other batteries, I think if you use regular batteries, I think that was a problem. But I know I used other batteries like this actually, and no corrosion has ever happened, me personally. But now we move on to the classic controller is what they call it for the Wii. You use these for virtual console games, whether you're playing the regular Nintendo, Super Nintendo, N64, any of those kind of games, you would use that controller. I don't know if I actually have it with me. Oh yeah, I do have one with me. It's really beat up, actually. It's very discolored. You know, feeling this now, I can still actually see myself using it. It still feels great, honestly. For like long play sessions, this honestly feels like a Super Nintendo controller. Like, for Super Nintendo games, this is easily doable. But then you have like small buttons like the ZL and ZR, like, which are on the inside of the controller. Okay, so let me show you something. This was never used. What Nintendo said this was gonna be was like, there was gonna be like an adapter or something, like a small little plastic thing that you hold onto the remote like that, and it would attach to it. It was never made. And I was like, what is this used for? This was never used, but that's what Nintendo said, but they never actually came out with this contraption that would stick onto the back of the remote. So, I don't know. Holding it still, I can still see myself playing this, like, honestly. Even though there were other better controllers that came out, yeah, I like it. I like it. I like this controller, actually. It actually still feels great. I'm putting that at S, honestly, because it honestly still feels great, even just moving it around. Like, I use that a lot for like all games. I didn't even use the Gamecube controller for that. I used that because it was so perfect. You didn't really need anything else. The 3DS, I've never held a 3DS in my life, but I don't know, I would assume it would feel the same as a regular DS. At least that's my thinking, but I also never held the Vita, so we're not gonna talk about that. I would assume it feels like the PSP, but okay, the Wii U gamepad. I think that this controller was okay. I'm putting it at like C. It was okay because, okay, for Mario Maker it was pretty good because you could like use the stylus to put like blocks and stuff. It was good for that. Like the touchscreen worked really good. I like the touchscreen on that. But then it has like weird things like a camera. Like why would you have a camera on there to like use, like, what, are you gonna take pictures with that? Like why would you need that? And then you have like a microphone. Like was it trying to be like a Nintendo DS? I don't know. But like if you're holding it regularly, I guess it's fine. I don't know. Like I said, it was, I do like the Wii U. I don't know, did I say I like that controller? I don't really know. I do like the touchscreen. That's probably the only thing that really works well with that. If you're trying to look at like what you're doing with like Super Mario Maker. I don't know, but one good controller that came out of that was the Wii U Pro Controller. And I think I have that right here, actually. I have the Wii U Pro Controller. This actually kind of similarly feels like the Xbox 360 controller, except the buttons would be up here and this stick would be down here. I don't know why they made that choice with this. There's like some smudge on this. I don't know why there's like smudge on it. Okay, if I'm trying to like, it honestly feels comfortable. Like, this is a good controller, but it's not as good as like the GameCube controller or like the DualShock. I don't know, it just doesn't feel as good. I mean, okay, it's a good controller. I will give it that. It's a good controller. It's comfortable, it's form-fitting to the hands. I can see myself playing a lot with this. I played Smash with this. Yeah, I like it, I would use it. but it's not, I'll put it at A. Or B. I think B's fair. I think B's fair. I think B's fair with that, honestly. It's not as good as the other top controllers, but it's pretty solid. I'm gonna say it's pretty solid. The Xbox One controller. I remember I loved the Xbox One controller. Xbox's controllers, they're great. For like playing games, like the limited amount of time that I had with the Xbox controller, I liked the clickiness of the buttons. I liked the clicking, and the sticks were a lot easier to move around. It was very comfortable. I liked the Xbox One controller. The DualShock 4. I like the DualShock 4. For some reason, that little touchpad with like you can use your finger on, I don't know why. I remember playing Infinite Warfare. Yes, I played Infinite Warfare for a brief amount of time. I forgot what mechanic it was that you used that touchpad for what reason. I don't know, but I do like the DualShock 4. I love the DualShock 4. The Joy-Cons. Now, I have a hot take on this. It's either between a B or a C, and I'm gonna tell you why. If you're using this as a regular controller for like your home console, if you like put this on the Joy-Con grip is what I'm talking about, it doesn't really work as well. But if you have it on the actual Switch using it in handheld mode, then it works leagues better. The Joy-Cons are good for like, actually, oh my god, I have so many conflicting things about this because, again, you could use the Joy-Cons any way you want. You can use them any way you want. You can have them separately, you can have them like singular. The versatility I like with that, but at the same time, it's like if you're using it as a regular controller, kind of like this, it's not good for it because the buttons are a little bit too small. It doesn't really like, it's not that comfortable like for like long game sessions, but if you're using it in handheld mode, then I would understand you doing that. These are a lot better in handheld mode because it just feels better that way as a handheld. I'm putting it at B. I think B's fair for it. It's staying at B because it's versatile. Like you can hold them any way you want. Like there's many ways you can hold those controllers. You can like, they have motion controls and then you could hold it like a smaller controller. You could hold it, you could have one controller in this hand, the other controller in this hand, lay it back and just play like that. Or you could hold it as a regular stuff like that, even though I wouldn't recommend you doing that. You could put it in handheld. Like the Switch has so many ways you could use that controller. The Switch Pro Controller is something that I would use every single time I play the Switch. Even in tabletop mode, I would use the Switch Pro Controller. The buttons are a lot bigger on that. The buttons are a lot bigger on that. Actually, I'm gonna put this at over here so we can have more space. I think these are fair ratings for these two anyway, but the Switch Pro Controller is probably Nintendo's best controller now. Right next to like the Gamecube. You can use this for Smash, you can use this for Mario Maker, you can use this for any other game. And also the Nintendo Gamecube controller are like side by side for Nintendo's best controllers that they ever made, hands down. The buttons are meatier, the control sticks are easy to use. Like even the D-pad feels great. I use the D-pad for like Mario Maker all the time because you need that D-pad to like use like for menus and stuff, and for like 2D games, the DualSense controller for the PS5. I actually have a PS5. Some people have the PS5. I'm pretty sure a lot of people have PS5s at this point. The DualSense controller, it goes in S. I don't know why I said but there, but it goes in S because what I'm talking about is like the triggers on that. The triggers are, I'm talking about L2 and R2. There's a mechanism in there that if you haven't felt it, I don't know how to explain it, but there's a mechanism in there that like stops you from pressing. It puts pressure on the way the triggers hold down. Because sometimes sometimes the mechanism just gives and the buttons are easier to press, but the mechanism stops it, and then it becomes harder to press. That's really impressive for a controller. And then there's like haptic feedback, I think. where like if you get hit on like the left side, let's say you're like using a rumble feature, you get hit on the left side of the controller will rumble more than the right side, which is another impressive. I think the DualSense controller is probably the most high-tech controller that you could possibly use. Like, there's so many mechanisms in there that make that controller so like advanced and way ahead of its time. And when I first saw the DualSense controller, I thought like the symbols on the controller would like light up when you use the controller. I don't know why I thought that, but it's a good controller, but it's very high tech and it's way ahead of its time. So I think this is a fair rating. This is another S tier, A tier, like stairs. I don't know. This is my tier list. Maybe you guys agree, maybe you guys don't. I don't know. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.